The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the quiet rural landscape. The streets were nearly empty as most of the town had gone about their evening routines. But in the shadows, in the lonely corner of the field near the edge of town, there stood an old man, hunched and frail, his weathered face a map of regret and sorrow. His name was Henry, but most folks around the town had stopped using it. They just referred to him as the old man, and he liked it that way. The fewer people who remembered his name, the fewer questions he had to answer. Henry shuffled along, his steps slow and deliberate, the sound of his cane tapping against the dirt road echoing in the stillness. His life had grown dull in recent years. No family to speak of, no friends left to visit. Loneliness was his constant companion, a companion he had grown used to. It wasn't that he hated people, it was that they had stopped coming. He had built walls around himself, walls made of pride and bitterness, and over the years, those walls had become unscalable. As he walked, his eyes wandered across the field, where the tall grass swayed gently in the wind. He stopped, squinting at a small movement among the brush. His old heart didn't beat faster. It didn't even stir with curiosity. He had long stopped being moved by anything in the world, but something in the grass caught his eye. 3 tiny, struggling creatures. He approached slowly, his cane tapping against the earth. As he got closer, the figures took shape. 3 German shepherd puppies, no more than a few weeks old, their tiny bodies curled in a pitiful ball on the ground. They were abandoned, left to fend for themselves in the cold, unforgiving world. For a moment, a flicker of something, a distant memory, flashed in Henry's mind. He remembered a time, many decades ago, when he had loved animals. He had owned dogs in his youth, cared for them as though they were family. But that was a lifetime ago, and the world had changed. People had changed. He had changed. Why should I care? He muttered to himself, looking down at the puppies. They're just dogs. No one's coming for them. With a sigh, he reached down and grabbed the nearest puppy by the scruff of its neck, pulling it up with ease. The small creature whimpered in his grip, its tiny body trembling. But Henry wasn't moved. He dropped it onto the ground by the tree, where he began tying it up with an old rope he carried with him. Then he repeated the process with the other 2, the puppies' helpless cries filling the air. The puppies, frightened and confused, struggled against the ropes that bound them, but it was no use. Henry tied each of them tightly to the tree, their little bodies unable to escape. As he stepped back, he surveyed his work, a satisfied but hollow look in his eyes. They'll be fine, he muttered to himself, turning away. Better this than nothing. With that, Henry began to walk away, his cane tapping against the ground. The puppies' whimpers grew quieter as they were left behind, bound to the tree in the fading light. They had no idea what would happen next, no idea if anyone would come to help. All they knew was the cold, the fear, and the helplessness of their situation. And as Henry disappeared into the distance, they were left with only each other, their small bodies huddled together for warmth, waiting for the unknown. As the fading light of the afternoon sun dimmed into a pale twilight, the 3 puppies sat huddled together, their little bodies trembling. They had been abandoned by the one person they had hoped would be their protector, and now they were alone in the world, tied to a tree with no way to escape. Their tiny forms were no match for the harshness of the world around them. The smallest of the 3, a delicate pup with dark brown eyes, whimpered quietly. Her small paws scratched at the dirt, trying to free herself, but the rope was too tight. She pulled harder, her muscles straining, but the knot held firm. Each tug seemed only to tighten the rope further, cutting into her soft fur. Her heart raced as panic set in, but she had no idea how to make it stop. She stopped for a moment, her tiny chest heaving with each shallow breath, before trying again, pulling and pulling with all her might. Beside her, the second puppy, a larger male with a thick, sleek coat, watched helplessly. He, too, struggled with the ropes, but his attempts were just as futile. His teeth nipped at the frayed ends of the cord, trying to chew through it, but it was too thick, too tough. His body was growing tired, his energy draining with each failed attempt. His eyes darted to his 2 siblings, the fear in his eyes mirroring their own. They were all in this together, bound by the same ropes, the same fate, and it felt like there was no escape. The third puppy, the largest of the three, sat still for a moment, her bright eyes scanning the field. Her fur ruffled gently in the evening breeze, and though she was the most active of the three, she, too, began to slow. She had noticed something in the distance earlier. Movement, perhaps another person, but it was too far to tell. Now, though, the sight of the small girl's silhouette from earlier came rushing back to her mind. Was that a person who would help them? Her heart fluttered in anticipation, but as she looked again, she saw nothing. The field remained empty, the wind rustling through the tall grass, leaving behind only the silence and the scent of the damp earth. There was no one there, just the cold, the fear, and the endless struggle. The moon now hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the scene. The puppies had grown quieter, exhausted from their efforts and worn down by the cold. Their bodies shivered, not just from the chill of the night air, but from the uncertainty, from the feeling that no one would come. They had no way of knowing, of course, but the cruel reality was that the world was full of people who turned away from suffering. The puppies had no way of understanding how many others had passed by, how many had seen their plight and chosen not to act. All they knew was that they were alone. As the night deepened, their whimpers became fainter, their cries weaker, until the only sound that remained was the soft rustling of the leaves above them and the occasional whine of the smallest pup. Their little bodies leaned against each other for warmth, the only comfort they could give one another in this moment of utter hopelessness. Mia loved walking to her grandmother's house after school. The path through the fields was her favorite route, quiet and peaceful, with the warm breeze tussling her dark hair. She'd often skip along, humming little tunes and collecting wildflowers, her heart light and carefree. But on this particular afternoon, something felt different. There was a strange tension in the air, a sense of urgency that she couldn't quite shake. As she walked down the familiar trail, a sound reached her ears, soft, desperate whimpers. Mia froze, her head tilting slightly as she tried to pinpoint the source. She had heard animals before, squirrels, birds, the occasional rabbit hopping by. But this was different. This was a cry for help, faint but unmistakable. Without thinking, her feet began to move, pulling her in the direction of the sound. The field before her stretched out, its golden grasses swaying gently in the evening breeze. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm, amber light over the landscape. Mia's curiosity grew, and she quickened her pace, her eyes scanning the open space until they landed on the sight that would change everything. There, under the shadow of a gnarled tree, 3 tiny figures lay tied to the trunk, their bodies small and vulnerable. Mia's heart skipped a beat. 3 puppies, their fur matted and tangled, their tiny bodies shaking in the cold. The sight stopped her in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. They looked so helpless, so innocent, their eyes wide with fear. Her first instinct was to run to them, to pick them up and cradle them in her arms. But as she got closer, she saw the ropes that bound them, thick and tight, cruelly wrapped around their tiny bodies. The smallest of the 3, a little female with brown eyes, whimpered as she struggled against the knot, but it was no use. Mia's stomach twisted with both anger and pity. How could someone do this to them? "Hey there," Mia called softly, kneeling beside the puppies. Her voice was gentle, comforting, as she reached out to the nearest one, stroking its soft fur. The puppy's eyes blinked up at her in confusion and fear, but slowly, as Mia continued to whisper soothing words, its body began to relax. "Don't worry, I'm going to help you," Mia promised, her voice filled with determination. She gently tugged at the rope that bound the puppy to the tree, but it wouldn't budge. The knot was tied too tightly. Frustration bubbled inside Mia, but she didn't give up. "It's okay," she murmured, almost as if she were reassuring herself as much as the puppy. She reached into her pockets, hoping to find something useful, but all she had were a few small pebbles from earlier in the day. Mia stood up, her heart racing. She had to do something. The puppy's cries had grown softer, their energy fading with each passing minute. She looked around the field, her eyes scanning for help, but there was no one, not a soul in sight. Her gaze fell on a small shed in the distance. Mia knew exactly where it was, her grandmother's old storage shed. She had seen her grandmother keep tools there, simple tools that might be able to help her. Without a second thought, Mia turned and sprinted toward the shed, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. She couldn't bear to leave the puppies alone for long, but she knew that if she wanted to set them free, she needed something to cut through the ropes. Time was running out. The puppies couldn't wait much longer. Mia's small legs moved swiftly as she ran towards her grandmother's shed, her heart pounding with a mix of urgency and fear. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the horizon, and the air was growing colder by the second. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps as she reached the shed, the wooden door creaking open as she pulled it toward her. Inside, the familiar scent of old tools and pine wood filled the air. Her eyes scanned the shelves, her fingers brushing over various items until they landed on what she was looking for: a small, rusted knife her grandmother sometimes used for gardening. Mia grabbed it without hesitation, tucking it into the waistband of her skirt as she turned and bolted back toward the field. The puppies were still there, their bodies slumped against the tree, their ropes pulling tighter with every shift. Mia felt a pang of guilt for leaving them, but she couldn't afford to waste time. She had to act quickly. When she arrived back at the tree, the sight of the puppies' sad, tired faces almost made her heart break. The smallest one, the brown-eyed female, had stopped struggling altogether, her eyes barely open as she rested her head on the dirt. The larger male was weak, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, while the third, the largest puppy, seemed to be the most alert, though her body shook with exhaustion. Mia kneeled down beside them once more, her hands trembling as she took out the knife. The blade was small, not much more than a few inches long, but it would have to do. She pressed it against the first knot, her fingers wrapping tightly around the handle. With a deep breath, she began to saw at the thick rope, the metal scraping against the fibers as the knot refused to loosen. The puppies whined faintly, their eyes lifting to look at her, as if they were trying to understand what she was doing. Mia whispered to them, her voice soft and comforting. "Hold on, I'm almost there," she murmured, focusing all her energy on cutting through the rope. The knife slipped a few times, and Mia had to stop, gritting her teeth in frustration. It wasn't easy. Cutting through the thick knot was a battle, but she refused to stop. She had made a promise to them, and she wasn't about to break it. With one final determined pull, the rope snapped free. The first puppy, the brown-eyed one, let out a weak yelp of surprise before looking up at Mia, her body swaying with weakness, but now freed from the cruel bindings. Mia smiled with relief, her hands moving quickly to the second puppy. Again, she worked with determination, each second feeling like an eternity. The knife dug deeper into the rope, the fibers snapping one by one until the second puppy was also freed. This time, the larger male let out a soft whimper of gratitude, his tail wagging weakly as he tried to stand. Mia didn't waste time to celebrate. She turned to the last puppy, her fingers already on the final knot. This one was tighter than the rest, but Mia didn't flinch. She knew this was the last step, the final push to freedom. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she pulled the knife through the rope, her heart racing with anticipation. The knot finally gave way, and the last puppy was free. With a weak, grateful yelp, it tumbled forward, its legs shaky but determined. The three puppies, now free, crawled slowly toward Mia, their bodies still trembling from fear, but their spirits alight with the joy of newfound freedom. Mia sat back on her heels, breathless but filled with an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She smiled as the puppies licked her hands, their small tones warm and grateful. "You're safe now," she whispered to them, gently rubbing their fur. The weight of the moment, the danger they had faced, and the relief of having set them free, settled in her chest. For the first time in a long while, Mia felt a deep, unshakable sense of pride. She had done it. She had saved them. And nothing in the world could have made her feel more certain that she had done the right thing. Just as Mia sat back, her heart swelling with the satisfaction of rescuing the three puppies, she heard the sharp sound of footsteps approaching. Her head snapped around, her breath catching in her throat. There, emerging from the shadows at the edge of the field, was the old man, Henry. Mia froze for a moment, uncertainty creeping into her chest. She had been so focused on the puppies, so certain that they were safe, that she hadn't noticed him coming. But now, as he limped toward them, his cane tapping rhythmically against the ground, there was no mistaking the anger on his face. His features were twisted into a scowl, his eyes narrowed with fury. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice was harsh, like gravel scraping against stone. He was closer now, his stiff form looming over Mia and the puppies. Mia's eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. She stood tall, her hands still resting gently on the puppies, who were now slowly beginning to recover, their tiny bodies relaxing as they adjusted to their newfound freedom. She didn't say anything at first, her eyes meeting his with a quiet determination. "I'm saving them," Mia replied, her voice steady despite the old man's fury. She hadn't been expecting him to return so soon, but now that he was here, she wasn't going to let him intimidate her, not after what she had just done. Henry's eyes flickered with disbelief. "Saving them?" he repeated bitterly. "You think these dogs are worth saving? They're just animals, just a bunch of worthless creatures. They don't matter." His words stung, but Mia refused to back down. She didn't understand how someone could think that way, especially after seeing how much the puppies needed help. She glanced at them, their eyes wide with confusion and trust as they gazed up at her. "They matter to me," Mia said firmly, her voice growing more confident with each word. "They matter to the world. They deserve a chance to live." She stepped forward, her gaze not wavering. "And I won't let you hurt them anymore." Henry's face twisted with anger, his hands trembling at his sides. He took a step toward her, and for a moment, Mia feared he might lash out. The air between them was thick with tension, a heavy silence that seemed to stretch on forever. The puppies cowered slightly, but Mia held her ground, refusing to show fear. "You don't know anything about life," Henry sneered, his voice cracking with bitterness. "You don't know what it's like to be alone, to be forgotten." His eyes softened for just a moment, and Mia saw something deeper, something she hadn't expected. His anger wasn't just directed at her. It was a lifetime of loneliness, a lifetime of regret, a lifetime of pain, all spilling out in that moment. Mia's heart ached, but she didn't step back. "I know that no one should be forgotten, and I know these puppies deserve love, not cruelty. You can't take that away from them." Henry's hand dropped to his side, his fist clenching before slowly loosening. For a brief moment, he was silent, looking down at the puppies who were now wagging their tails, their tiny bodies full of energy once more. His face softened as he observed them, the anger beginning to drain from his features. Mia took a slow step forward, her voice gentle. "You don't have to be alone, you know. It's never too late to change." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that seemed to settle on Henry's shoulders. The old man's gaze flickered toward her, a mix of emotions swirling in his tired eyes. For the first time in a long while, he seemed uncertain. His hands trembled again, but not from rage this time. It was something else, a shift, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. Henry opened his mouth to say something, but the words got stuck in his throat. He stared at Mia, at the puppies, and for a long moment, he simply stood there, his mind racing. Something was changing within him, something he hadn't felt in years. And as he watched Mia kneel down beside the puppies, his heart twisted with a feeling he couldn't quite place, remorse, perhaps, or the flicker of a long-lost hope. Henry stood frozen, watching Mia care for the puppies. The warm glow of the fading sun bathed the scene in a soft golden light, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. The weight of the moment settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. For years, he had buried himself in his own bitterness, convinced that the world owed him something it had never given. His anger had been his shield, keeping the pain of his past at bay. But now, as he stood there, he couldn't ignore the truth that was staring him in the face. The puppies, their innocence and vulnerability, and Mia with her unwavering kindness. The puppies were no longer just a reminder of his isolation. They were living beings, full of life and hope, despite the cruelty they had already faced. Mia had given them that hope, and in doing so, she had shaken something deep within Henry. The old man's eyes flickered between the puppies and the little girl, and for the first time in years, he felt a wave of guilt wash over him. A guilt that he couldn't push away, no matter how hard he tried. "You've changed everything for them," Henry muttered under his breath, more to himself than to Mia. His voice was rough, as though the years of holding everything inside had finally caught up with him. He took a hesitant step forward, his cane tapping softly against the dirt. He wasn't sure why he was moving closer. Maybe he was looking for a chance to apologize, or maybe he was just too tired to keep fighting the feelings that were creeping into his heart. Mia, still crouched beside the puppies, looked up at him, her expression soft and open. She didn't look at him with anger or fear, even after everything he had done. Instead, there was understanding in her gaze, a quiet, patient understanding that made Henry feel both exposed and oddly comforted. "You were right about one thing," Henry continued, his voice shaky. "I don't know what it's like to be loved anymore. I've spent so many years pushing people away." He paused, swallowing hard. "I thought it was easier that way." Mia's heart clenched as she listened. She could see the pain in his eyes, the regret that was finally breaking through his tough exterior. But more than that, she could see the possibility of something else, the chance for redemption, for healing. "Maybe it's not too late," Mia said softly, offering him a small, kind smile. "It's never too late to change, Henry. To make things right." She glanced at the puppies, who were now wagging their tails, their eyes bright and trusting. "They need someone who will care for them. And I think you could be that person if you want to be." Henry's breath hitched at her words. The idea seemed almost impossible, like a dream he hadn't dared to entertain in a long time. Could he truly care for something again? Could he open his heart after all these years of solitude and bitterness? He looked at the puppies once more. They were so small, so fragile, yet their simple joy seemed to pierce through the fog that had clouded his mind for so long. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, compassion, tenderness, a connection to something beyond himself. I don't know if I can," Henry whispered, his voice barely audible. "I've been so lost in my anger, in my loneliness. I've forgotten how to be kind." Mia's smile didn't waver. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try." The old man stood still, the weight of her words sinking in. For a long time, he had believed he was beyond help, beyond redemption. But now, for the first time, he wondered if that was really true. The puppies, who had been nothing more than a burden to him at first, were now a lifeline, a chance to heal, to reconnect with something he had long buried. Henry's hands shook as he reached down to gently pet the puppies, their soft fur against his rough skin feeling like a small miracle. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the moment settle in. The guilt was still there, but it was accompanied by something new, hope. A glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could start over. "I'll try," he said, his voice steadier now. "I'll try for them." Mia's heart swelled with relief as she watched the old man, his posture no longer so hunched, his eyes filled with something softer than before. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. A new chapter for both of them. And as the evening sky deepened into night, Mia felt a quiet sense of peace settle over the scene, knowing that she had helped not only the puppies, but also an old man who had been lost for too long. The next few days passed in a quiet, yet transformative way for both Henry and the puppies. Mia continued to visit them, her heart light, knowing that the puppies were no longer in danger. Henry, though hesitant at first, had kept his promise. He had begun to care for the puppies with a tenderness he had forgotten he was capable of. Mia watched from a distance, observing the small changes in the old man. His rough hands, which had once been stiff and unyielding, were now gentle as they fed the puppies or petted them. He had cleared a small area near the tree where they had been tied, making it comfortable for the puppies to sleep. He'd even gone to the local store to buy them some food and blankets, things he never would have done before. The transformation was slow, but it was happening. One afternoon, as Mia approached the field, she noticed Henry sitting on a wooden bench beneath the tree, the puppies nestled at his feet. He was talking to them in a low, gravelly voice, the kind of voice that only came from someone who had spent a lifetime keeping their thoughts to themselves. But now those words were for the puppies, soft and full of affection. Mia stood quietly for a moment, watching him. The old man had always seemed so isolated, so disconnected from everything around him. But now, in the presence of these three little puppies, he seemed different, softer, more open. The harsh lines on his face had begun to soften, and the anger that had once consumed him seemed to dissipate in the gentle rhythm of his care. "Henry?" Mia called out, her voice tentative. He turned, his eyes meeting hers, and for a moment there was a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. But then a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Mia," he said, his voice warmer than it had ever been before. "They're doing better. I think they're starting to trust me." Mia's heart swelled at the sight of him sitting there, surrounded by the puppies. It was a side of Henry she had never seen before, and it filled her with hope. "I can see that," she said, her voice full of warmth. "You're doing great." Henry nodded, his eyes lingering on the puppies as they played around his feet. "It's strange," he murmured, almost to himself. "I didn't think I could care about anything again, but they've made me feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Like maybe I'm not as lost as I thought." Mia's smile grew. "It's not too late, Henry. You're not lost. You're just finding your way." For the first time, Henry didn't argue with her. Instead, he looked down at the puppies, who were now tumbling over each other in a playful frenzy. His heart swelled with a feeling he couldn't quite describe, something between joy and relief, something that felt like redemption. The puppies were more than just pets to him now. They were companions, healers, reminders that even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of hope. And they had brought him back from the edge, given him a chance to be something more than the bitter, angry man he had been for so long. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the field, Henry reached down and scooped up one of the puppies in his arms. He held it close, his expression tender, as the little pup licked his chin affectionately. He chuckled softly, the sound rich and genuine, a sound that hadn't left his lips in years. Mia sat down beside him, watching as the other puppies snuggled into the grass, content and safe. For the first time since she had met Henry, she felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. He had come so far, and though the road ahead was still long, Mia knew he wasn't walking it alone anymore. They sat there together for a long time, in quiet companionship, as the puppies drifted off to sleep at their feet. It was a simple moment, but it felt like everything was falling into place. The old man had found a new purpose, and the puppies had found a family. And Mia, who had sparked this change, knew that this was just the beginning of a beautiful new chapter for all of them. Weeks passed, and with each day, Henry's bond with the puppies grew stronger. Mia continued to visit, her heart full as she watched the transformation unfold before her eyes. The puppies, once terrified and trembling, now frolicked happily around Henry, their playful barks filling the air. They had become inseparable, a living testament to the power of second chances. Henry had started to open up in ways Mia never expected. He told her stories of his past, how he had once been full of life, full of love, until everything had fallen apart. The loss of his wife, the estrangement from his children, the slow isolation that had taken root in his heart. He spoke of his anger, of how it had consumed him for so long, until all that was left was bitterness. But the puppies had changed something in him. They had reminded him of the simple joys in life, the joy of caring for another living being, of giving and receiving love. Every day, Henry found himself doing things he hadn't done in years, laughing, smiling, taking walks around the field with the puppies, watching them explore the world with an innocence he had long forgotten. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Henry and Mia sat together on the bench beneath the tree. The puppies were curled up at their feet, their bodies relaxed in contentment. "You've come a long way, Henry," Mia said, her voice soft, filled with warmth. "I'm proud of you." Henry glanced at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I never thought I'd be here, Mia," he said quietly. "I thought I was too far gone. But these puppies, they've brought me back. You've brought me back." Mia smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "You did it, Henry. You found your way. It was always in you. Sometimes we just need a little help to see it." Henry nodded, his gaze shifting to the puppies, who were now playfully chasing each other in the fading light. I don't think I would have ever seen it without you. I owe you more than you know. Mia shook her head, her smile gentle. You don't owe me anything. You saved yourself. I just helped you realize that you could. The air around them felt lighter now, freer. Henry wasn't the man he had once been, angry and lost. He had found a new purpose in the love he gave to the puppies, in the small, daily acts of care and kindness that had slowly transformed his world. The darkness of his past had not vanished completely, but it no longer defined him. Instead, he had chosen a different path, one filled with compassion, understanding, and the promise of a better tomorrow. As the night sky deepened and the first stars began to twinkle overhead, Henry leaned back on the bench, his heart full. The puppies nestled closer to him, their soft breathing a peaceful reminder of everything he had gained. For the first time in many years, Henry felt truly at peace. The emptiness that had once consumed him was now filled with the warmth of companionship, of love, and of the knowledge that no one, no matter how lost they might feel, was beyond redemption. Mia stood up, her heart light as she looked at Henry and the puppies. She had come here to help them, to make a difference. But in the end, it was Henry who had made the biggest change. He had opened his heart and, in doing so, had found not only a family in the puppies, but a new lease on life. And for Mia, that was all she could ever hope for. Take care of them, she said softly, before turning to leave. They need you as much as you need them. Henry watched her go, his heart filled with gratitude. As the shadows of the evening stretched long across the field, he knew that this was just the beginning. The puppies had brought him back to life, and with them, he had found something more precious than he could have ever imagined. Hope, a chance at a second life, and the love that he had once thought lost forever. And with that, the small family, Mia, Henry, and the puppies, walked into the future side by side, ready to embrace whatever came next.